Hello, howdy day. Stupid Monkey Philosophy back again. October 4th, 2022. Continuing John Locke's two treatises of government. Before we get on started on that, though, I do want to announce that we'll be beginning the beginning the series of shorts on Marcus Aurelius' Meditations and Stoicism broadly. Hopefully beginning tomorrow. That's my intent here. So, and again, a lot more content will be going up on Patreon. Going to be shifting some things around. Probably starting a lower dollar tier over there for the low end tier. So right now we've got 3, 5, and 10, and we'll just add that $1 tier and spread the perks out a bit more. So yeah, look forward to that. More content coming out on Patreon soon. I'm just going to wait a moment. Looks like I'm having a bit instability with my internet connection. Okay. Riding it out with that one bar. Well, I guess we'll go with that. All right, we're at chapter 6 of Paternal Power. PDF link in the description below. I'm going to do a overhaul on my Google Docs, so that'll be coming back soon. 52. It may perhaps be censored. Start that again. It may perhaps be impertinent criticism in a discourse of this nature to find fault with words and names that have obtained in the world, and yet possibly it may not be amiss to offer. And the old are apt to lead men into mistakes, as this of paternal power probably has done, which seems so to place the power of parents over their children wholly in the father, as if the mother had no share in it. Whereas if we consult reason or revelation, we shall find she has an equal title, which may give one reason to ask whether this might not be more properly called parental power. So John Locke apparently has a equal view for women here. Continue. For whatever obligation nature and the right of generation lays on must certainly bind them equally to both the concurrent causes of it, and accordingly we see the positive law of God everywhere joins them together without distinction when it commands the obedience of children. Honor thy father and mother, Exodus 20:12. Whosoever curses his father or his mother, Leviticus 29. Ye shall fear every man his mother and his father, Leviticus 19:3. Children and New Testament 53. Had but this one thing been well considered without looking any deeper into the matter, it might perhaps have kept men from running into those gross mistakes they have made about this power of parents, which however it might without any great harshness bear the name of absolute dominion and regal authority, when under the title of paternal power it seemed appropriated to the father, would yet have sounded but oddly, and in the very name shown the absurdity. If this supposed absolute power over children had been called parental, and thereby discovered that it belonged to the mother too. Yeah, it was a long-winded sentence. Continued. For it will but very ill serve the turn of those men who contend so much for the absolute power and authority of the fatherhood, as they call it, that the mother should have any share in it, and it would have but ill supported the monarchy they contend for, when by the very name it appeared that that fundamental authority from whence they would derive their government of a single person only was not placed in one, but two persons jointly. But to let this of names pass. 54. Though I have said above that all men by nature are equal, I cannot be supposed to understand all sorts of equality. Age or virtue may give men a just precedency. Excellency of parts and merit may place others above the common level. Birth may subject some, and alliance or benefits others. Birth may subject some, and alliance or benefits others, to pay an observance to those to whom nature, gratitude, or other respects may have made it due. So I guess good stock, right? And yet all this consists with the equality which men are in respect of jurisdiction or dominion one over another, which was the equality I there spoke of as proper to the business in hand, being that equal right that every man hath to his natural freedom, without being subjected to the will or authority of any other man, unless he's legally conquered by them, right? And then it just seems to conveniently skip over that point. All right, continued. 55. Children, I confess, are not born in this full state of equality, though they are born to it. Their parents have a sort of rule and jurisdiction over them when they come into the world, and for some time after, but it is a temporary one. The bonds of this subjection are like the swaddling clothes they are wrapped up in and supported by in the weakness of their infancy. Age and reason as they grow up loosen them, till at length they drop quite off, and leave a man at his own free disposal. 56. Adam was created a perfect man, his body and mind in full possession of their strength and reason, and so was capable from the first instance of his being to provide for his own support and preservation, and govern his actions according to the dictates of the law of reason God had implanted in him. From him the world is peopled with his descendants, who are all born infants, weak and helpless, without knowledge or understanding. But to supply the defects of this imperfect state, till the improvement of growth and age had removed them, Adam and Eve, and after them all parents were by the law of nature under an obligation to preserve, nourish, and educate the children they had begotten, not as their own workmanship, but the workmanship of their own Maker, the Almighty, to whom they were to be accountable for them. 57. The law that was to govern Adam was the same that was to govern all his posterity, the law of reason. But his offspring, having another way of entrance into the world, different from him by a natural birth that produced them ignorant, and without the use of reason, they were not presently under that law, for nobody can be under a law that is not promulgated to him, and this law being promulgated or made known by reason only, he that is not come to the use of his reason cannot be said to be under this law. And Adam's children not being not presently as soon as born under this law of reason, were not presently free. For law, in its true notion, is not so much the limitation as the direction of a free and intelligent agent to his proper interest, and prescribes no farther than is for the general good of those under that law. Could they be happier without it, the law, as a useless thing, would of itself vanish. And that ill deserves the name of confinement, which hedges us in only from bogs and precipices. Okay. So that, however it may be mistaken, the end of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. So that, however it may be, the end of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. I think that's a good summary of whatever the hell he was trying to say there. For in all the states of created beings, capable of laws, where there is no law, there is no freedom. For liberty is to be free from restraint and violence from others, which cannot be where there is no law. And is not, as we are told, a liberty for every man to do what he lists. For who could be free when every other man's humor might domineer over him? But a liberty to dispose and order freely as he lists his person, actions, possessions, and his whole property within the allowance of those laws under which he is, and therein not to be subject to the arbitrary will of another, but freely follow his own. So, Locke says that laws ultimately make us more free because they prevent us from being subjected to the whims of others, and the will of others. Interesting concept. I still think it's half bullshit and the other half lies, but 58. The power, then, that parents have over their children arises from that duty which is incumbent on them to take care of their offspring during the imperfect state of childhood, to inform the mind and govern the actions of their of their yet ignorant nonage, till reason shall take its place and ease them of that trouble, is what the children want, and the parents are bound to. For God, having given man an understanding to direct his actions, has allowed him a freedom of will and liberty of acting, as properly belonging thereunto within the bounds of that law he is under. But whilst he is in an estate wherein he has no understanding of his own to direct his will, he is not to have any will of his own to follow. He that understands for him must will for him too. He must prescribe to his will and regulate his actions. But when he comes to the estate that made his father a free man, the son is a free man too. I don't really think that necessarily gives guidance for when a boy should become a man, and I don't think it's necessarily that he should when the father did, because people mature, you know, differently. But yeah, okay. 59. This holds in all the laws a man is under, whether natural or civil. Is a man under the law of nature? What made him free of that law? What gave him a free disposing of his property according to his own will, within the compass of that law? I answer, in a state wherein he might be supposed capable to know that law, that so he might keep his actions within the bounds of it. When he has acquired that state, he is presumed to know how far that law is to be his guide, and how far he may make use of his freedom, and so comes to have it. Till then, somebody else must guide him, who is presumed to know how far the law allows such a liberty. If such a state of reason, such an age of discretion made him free, the same shall make his son free too. Is a man under the law of England? What made him free of that law? That is, to have the liberty to dispose of his actions and possessions according to his own will within the permission of that law, a capacity of knowing that law, which is supposed by that law at the age of 21, and in some cases sooner. If this made the father free, it shall make the son free too. Till then, we see the law allows the son to have no will, but he is to be guided by the will of his father or guardian, who is to understand for him. And if the father die and fail to substitute a deputy in his trust, if he hath not provided a tutor to govern his son during his minority, during his want of understanding, the law takes care to do it. Some other must govern him, and be a will to him until he hath attained to a state of freedom, and his understanding be fit to take the government of his will. But I think autonomy, full legal autonomy, as far as taking culpability and responsibility for one's actions, should be kind of a gradual process, which is much the way we do it in the U.S. It's not just one to the other. You take steps into being fully responsible for yourself before becoming, and even then, that's why we have the age of 18. You're an adult, but you can't drink till 21, which I don't know if I agree with that. As far as other various things you can and can't do at the age of 18, but and most people are having sex before that. Whether they, I'm not saying like age, like kids are having sex before they, anyway. All right, continued. But after that, the father and son are equally free, as much as tutor and pupil, after nonage, equally subjects of the same law together, without any dominion left in the father of the life, liberty, or estate of his son, whether they be only in the state and under the law, whether they be only in the state and under the law of nature, or under the positive laws of an established government. 60. But if through defects that may happen out of the ordinary course of nature, any one comes not to such a degree of reason, wherein he might be supposed capable of knowing the law, and so living within the rules of it, he is never capable of being a free man, he is never let loose to the disposure of his own will, because he knows no bounds to it, has not understanding its proper guide, but is continued under the tuition and government of all others all the time. His own understanding is incapable of that charge, and so lunatics and idiots are never set free from the government of their parents. Children who are not as yet come unto those years whereat they may have an innocence which are excluded by a natural defect from ever having. And so lunatics and idiots are never set free from the government of their parents. Wow, ain't that something? All right, thirdly, continue. Thirdly, madmen, which for the present cannot possibly have the use of right reason to guide themselves, have for their guide the reason that guideth other men which are tutors over them, to seek and procure their good for them, says Hooker. That's Hooker's work. All which seems no more than that duty which God and nature has laid on man, as well as other creatures, to preserve their offspring till they can be able to shift for themselves, and will scarce amount to an insistence or proof of parents' regal authority. 61. Thus we are born free as we are born rational, not that what we have actually the exercise of either. Age that brings one brings with it the other too, and thus we see how natural freedom and subjection to parents may consist together, and are both founded on the same principle. A child is free by his father's title, by his father's understanding, which is to govern him till he hath it of his own. The freedom of a man at years of discretion, and the subjection of child to his parents, whilst yet short of it, are so consistent and so distinguishable from that the most blinded contenders for monarchy, by right of fatherhood, cannot miss of it. The most obstinate cannot but allow it. For were their doctrine all true, were the right heir of Adam now known, and by that title settled a monarch in his throne, invested with all the absolute unlimited powers Sir Robert Filmer talks of, if he should die as soon as his heir were born, must not the child, notwithstanding he were never so free, never so much sovereign, but be in subjection to his mother and nurse, to tutors and governors, till age and education brought him reason and ability to govern himself and others? The necessities of his life, the health of his body, and the information of his mind would require him to be directed by the will of others, and not his own. And yet, will anyone think that this restraint and subjection were inconsistent with, or spoiled him of, that liberty or sovereignty he had a right to, or gave away his empire to those who had the government of his nonage? This government over him only prepared him the better and sooner for it. If anybody should ask me when my son is to be of age to be free, I shall answer, just when his monarch is of age to govern. But at what time? Says the judicious Hooker. A man may be said to have attained so far forth the use of reason as sufficeth to make him capable of those laws whereby he is then bound to guide his actions. This is a great deal more easy for sense to discern than for anyone by skill and learning to determine. 62. Commonwealths themselves we take notice of, and allow that there is a time when men are to begin to act like free men, and therefore till that time require not oaths of fealty or allegiance, or other public owning of or submission to the government of their countries. 63. The freedom then of man, rather, and liberty of acting according to his own will, is grounded on his having reason, which is able to instruct him in that law he has to govern himself by, and make him known how far he is left the freedom of his own will. To turn him loose to an unrestrained liberty, before he has reason to guide him, is not the allowing him the privilege of his nature to be free, but to thrust him out amongst brutes, and abandon him to a state as wretched, and as much beneath that of a man as theirs. This is that which puts the authority into the parents' hands to govern the minority of their children. God hath made it their business to employ this care on their offspring, and hath placed in them suitable inclinations of tenderness and concern to temper this power, to apply it as his wisdom designed it, to the children's good as long as they should need to be under it. 64. But what reason can hence advance this care of the parents due to their offspring into an absolute, arbitrary dominion of the father, whose power reaches no farther than by such a discipline as he finds most effectual to give such strength and health to their bodies, such vigor and rectitude to their minds, as may best fit his children to be most useful to themselves and others, and, if it be necessary to his condition, to make them work when they are able for their own subsistence. But in this power the mother too has her share with the father. 65. Nay, this power so little belongs to the father by any peculiar right of nature, but only as he is guardian of his children, that when he quits his care of them he loses his power over them, which goes along with their nourishment and education, to which it is inseparably annexed, and belongs as much to the foster father of an exposed child as to the natural father of another. So little power does the bare act of begetting a man over his issue, if all his care ends there, and this will be all the title he hath to the name and authority of a father. And what will become of this paternal power in the part of the world where one woman hath more than one husband at a time? Or in those parts of America where, when the husband and wife part, which happens frequently, the children are all left to the mother, follow her, and are wholly under her care and provision? And if the father die whilst the children are young, do they not naturally everywhere owe the same obedience to their mother during their minority as to their father were he alive? And will any one say that the mother hath a legislative power over her children, that she can make standing rules which shall be of perpetual obligation, by which they ought to regulate all concerns of their property, and bound their liberty, all the course of their lives, and enforce the observation of them with capital punishments. For this is the proper power of the magistrate, of which the Father hath not so much as the shadow. His command over his children is but temporary, and reaches not their life or property. It is but a help to the weakness and imperfection of their knowledge, a discipline necessary to their education. And though a father may dispose of his own possessions as he pleases, when his children are out of danger of perishing for want, yet his power extends not to the lives or goods which either their own industry or another's bounty has made theirs, nor to their liberty, neither when they are once arrived to the enfranchisement of the years of discretion. The father's empire then ceases, and he can from thenceforward no more dispose of the liberty of his son than that of any other man. And it must be far from an absolute or perpetual jurisdiction from which a man may withdraw himself, having license from divine authority to leave father and mother and cleave to his wife. So, we take what we will from Locke there. But pretty much this whole argument is divine authority argument. So. 66. But though there be a time when a child comes be as free from subjection to the will and command of his, is free from subjection to the will of anybody else, and they are both under no other restraint but that which is common to them both, whether it be the law of nature or municipal law of their country. Yet this freedom exempts not a son from that honor which he ought by the law of God and nature to pay his parents, God having made them instruments in his great design of continuing the race of mankind and the occasions of life to their children, as he hath laid on them an obligation to nourish, preserve, and bring up their offspring, so he hath laid on the children a perpetual obligation of honoring their parents, which, containing in it an inward esteem and reverence to be shown by all outward expressions, ties up the child from anything that may ever injure or affront, disturb, or endanger the happiness or life of those from whom he received his, and engages him in all actions of defense, relief, assistance, and comfort of those by whose means he entered into being, and has been made capable of any enjoyments of life. From this obligation, no state, no freedom can absolve children. But this is very far from giving parents a power of command over their children, or an authority to make laws and dispose as they please of their lives or liberties. It is one thing to honor, respect, gratitude, and assistance, another to require an absolute obedience and submission. The honor due to parents, a monarch on his throne owes his mother, and yet this lessens not his authority nor subjects him to her government. 67. The subjection of a minor places in the father a temporary government which terminates with the minority of the child, and the honor due from a child places in the parents a perpetual right to respect, reverence, support, and compliance, to more or less as the father's care, cost, and kindness in his education has been more or less, and this ends not with minority, but holds in all parts and conditions of a man's life. Okay. So this is forever, yo. It's forever. The want of distinguishing these two powers which the Father hath, in the right of tuition during minority and the right of honor all his life, may perhaps have caused a great part of the mistakes about this matter. For, to speak properly of them, the first of these is rather the privilege of children and duty of parents than any prerogative of paternal power. The nourishment and education of their children is a charge so incumbent on parents for their children's good that nothing can absolve them from taking care of it. And though the power of commanding and chastising them go along with it, yet God hath woven into the principles of human nature such a tenderness for their offspring, that there is little fear that parents should use their power with too much vigor. The excess is seldom on the severe side. The strong bias of nature drawing the other way, and therefore God Almighty, when he would express his gentle dealing with the Israelites, tells them, though he chastened them as a man chastens his son, Deuteronomy, i.e., with tenderness and affection, and kept them under no severer discipline than what was absolutely best for them, and had been less kindness to have slackened. That is period. Okay, I really need those glasses. This is that power to which children are commanded obedience, and the pains and care of their parents may not be increased or ill rewarded. All right. We're at 67. Go ahead and do 68 and wrap this one up and come back to it tomorrow. All right, 68. On the other side, honor and support all that which gratitude requires to return for the benefits received by and from them is the indispensable duty of the child and the proper privilege of the parents. This is intended for the parents' advantage, as the other is for the child's, though education, the parents' duty, seems to have the most power, because the ignorance and infirmities of childhood stand in need of restraint and correction, which is a visible exercise of rule and a kind of dominion. And that duty which is comprehended in the word honor requires less obedience, though the obligation be stronger on grown than younger children. For who can think the command, "Children, obey your parents," requires in a man that has children of his own the same submission to his father as it does in his yet young children to him, and that by this precept he were bound to obey all his father's commands, if, out of a conceit of authority, he should have the indiscretion to treat him still as a boy. When we come back, we'll be in number 69 here, chapter 6. Totally. Yeah, that was Stupid Monkey Philosophy for October 4th. Hope you all are having a great week so far. Lots planned, lots coming up. We have the technology. We can do this. Don't forget to go subscribe on Patreon if you haven't. And that's Patreon, Trustyapeco, TRUSTYAPECO. And Stupid Monkey out.